Alright, how's everyone doing today? Welcome back to Echo Park. Shelby wants to get it on the book reading, I guess. I'm trying different views, different setup. I'm using a cell phone to record, so I was holding it in the first part, in the first couple of videos, and that's kind of a pain to do, so paper's a pain to keep on the book too. So let's move on to part 1, chapter 2. Bosch and Ryder were 10 minutes late because of the backup of people waiting for elevators. He hated coming to the criminal courts building because of the elevators. Got my glasses back on. Don't really need them, but just makes it easier. Alright. The wait and the jostling for position just to get on one of them put a layer of anxiety on him that he could live without. In reception, in the DA's office on the 16th floor, they were told to wait for an escort back to O'Shea's office. After a couple minutes, a man stepped through the doorway and pointed to the briefcase Bosch was holding. "You got it?" he asked. Bosch didn't recognize him. He was a dark-complected Latino in a gray suit. Olivis? Olivis? "Yeah, you brought the file." "Yeah, you brought the file?" "I brought the file." "Then come on back, hotshot." Olivis headed back towards the door he had come through. Ryder made a move to follow, but Bosch put his hand on her arm. When Olivis looked back and saw they were not following him, he stopped. "You coming or not?" Bosch took a step towards him. "Olivis, let's get something clear before we go anywhere. You call me hotshot again, and I'm going to shove the file up your ass without taking it out of my briefcase." Olivis raised his hands in surrender. "Whatever you say." He held the door, and they followed him into the internal hallway. They went down a long corridor and took 2 rights before coming to O'Shea's office. It was a large space, particularly by district attorney's office standards. Most of the time, prosecutors shared offices, 2 or 4 to a room, and held their meetings in strictly scheduled interview rooms at the end of each hallway. But O'Shea's office was double-sized with room for a piano crate, desk, and a separate seating area. Being the head of special prosecutions obviously had its perks. Being the heir apparent to the top job did as well. O'Shea welcomed them from behind his desk, standing up to shake hands. He was about 40 and handsome, with jet black hair. He was short, as Bosch already knew, even though he had never met him before. He had noticed while catching some of the TV coverage of the Waits prelim, that most of the reporters who gathered around O'Shea in the hallway outside of the courtroom were taller than the man they pointed their microphone at. Personally, Bosch liked short prosecutors. They were always trying to make up for something, and usually it was the defendant who ended up paying the price. Everybody took seats, O'Shea behind the desk, Bosch and Ryder in chairs facing him, and Olivis to the right side of the desk in a chair positioned in front of a stack of Rick O'Shea all-the-way posters leaning against the wall. "Thank you for coming in, detectives," O'Shea said. "Let's start by clearing the air a little bit. Freddie tells me you two got off to a rough start. I should tell you that any reluctance on his part to fill you in on what we have here came directly from me because of the sensitive nature of what we are doing. So if you are angry, be angry with me. I'm not angry, Bosch said. I'm happy. Ask my partner. This is me when I'm happy. Ryder nodded. He's happy, she said. Definitely happy. Okay then, O'Shea said. Everybody's happy. So let's get down to business. O'Shea reached over and put his hand above a thick accordion file placed on the right side of his desk. It was open, and Bosch saw that it contained several individual files with blue tabs on them. Bosch was too far away to read them, especially without putting on the glasses he had recently begun carrying with him. Are you familiar with the Raynard Watts prosecution? O'Shea asked. Bosch and Ryder nodded. It would have been kind of hard to miss, Bosch said. O'Shea nodded and offered a slight smile. Yes, we have pushed it out in front of the cameras. The guy's a butcher, a very evil man. We've said from the start that we are going for the death penalty on it. From what I've heard and seen, he's a poster boy for it, Ryder said encouragingly. O'Shea nodded somberly. That's one reason why you are here. Before I explain what we have going, let me ask you to tell me about your investigation of the Marie Gesto case. Freddie said you've had the file out of archives 3 times in the past year. Is there something active? Bosch cleared his throat after deciding to give first and then receive. You could say I've had the case for 13 years. I caught it back in '93 when she went missing, but nothing ever came of it. Bosch shook his head. We had no body. All we ever found was her car, and that was not enough. We never made anybody for it. Not even a suspect? We looked at a lot of people, one in particular, but we couldn't make the connection, and so nobody rose to the level of active suspect. Then I retired in '02, and it went into archives. A couple years go by, and things don't work out the way I thought they would in retirement, and I come back on the job. That was last year. Bosch didn't think it was necessary to tell O'Shea that he had copied the Gesto file and taken it with him, along with several other open cases. When he left his badge behind and walked out the door in 2002, copying the files had been an infraction of department regs, and the fewer people who knew, that's the better. In the last year, I pulled the Gesto file every time I had a little time to work it, he continued. But there's no DNA, no latents. There's only legwork. I've talked to all the principals again, everybody I could find. There's still the one guy out there who I always felt could be the guy, but I never could make anything out of it. I talked to him twice this year, leaned pretty hard, and nothing. Who is it? His name's Anthony Garland. He comes from Hancock Park. Money. You ever heard of Thomas Rex Garland? The oil man? O'Shea nodded. Well, T-Rex, as he is known, is Anthony's father. What's Anthony's connection to Gesto? Connection might be too strong a word. Maria Gesto's car was found in a single garage attached to a Hollywood apartment building. The apartment is correspondent to was empty. Our sense of things at the time was that it wasn't just coincidence that the car ended up in there. We thought whoever hid the car there knew the apartment was vacant and that he'd get a decent ride out of hiding it there. Okay, Anthony Garland knew about the garage, or he knew Marie. He knew about the garage. His former girlfriend had lived in the apartment. She had broken up with him and then moved back to Texas. So he knew the apartment and the garage were empty. That's pretty thin. That's all you had? Pretty much. We thought it was thin, too. But then we pulled the ex-girlfriend's DMV mug, and it turned out she and Marie looked a lot alike. We started to think that maybe Marie had been some sort of replacement victim. He couldn't get to his ex-girlfriend because she had left, so he got to Marie instead. Did you go to Texas? Twice. We talked to the ex, and she told us that the main reason she split with Anthony was because of his temper. Was he violent with her? She said no. She said she left before it got to that point. O'Shea leaned forward. So, did Anthony Garland know Marie? He asked. We don't know. We are not sure he did. Until his father brought his lawyer into it and he stopped talking to us, he denied ever knowing her. When was this? The lawyer, I mean. Back then, and now? I came at him again a couple times this year. I pressed him and he lawyered up again. Different lawyers this time. They were able to get a restraining order reissued against him. They convinced a judge to order me to stay away from Anthony unless he had a lawyer with him. My guess is that they convinced the judge with money. It's the way T-Rex Garland gets things done. O'Shea leaned back, nodding thoughtfully. Does this Anthony Garland have any kind of criminal record before or after Gesto? No, not a criminal record. He hasn't been a very productive member of society. He lives off his old man's handouts. As near as I can tell, he runs security for his father and his various enterprises. But there's never been anything criminal that I could find. Wouldn't it stand to reason that someone who had kidnapped and killed a young woman would have other criminal activity on his record? These things usually aren't aberrations, are they? If you went with the percentages, yeah, but there are always exceptions to the rule. Plus, there's the old man's money. Money smooths a lot of things over, makes a lot of things go away. O'Shea nodded again, like he was learning about criminals and crime for the first time. It was a bad act. What was your next move going to be? He asked. Bosch shook his head. I didn't have one. I sent the file back to archives and thought that was it. Then a couple weeks ago I went down and pulled it again. I don't know what I was going to do. Maybe talk to some of Garland's more recent friends. See if he ever mentioned Marie Gesto or anything about her. All I knew for sure was that I wasn't going to give up. O'Shea cleared his throat, and Bosch knew he would now get down to the reason they were there. Did the name Ray or Reynard Waits ever come up in all these years of investigating Gesto's disappearance? Bosch looked at him for a moment, his stomach twisting. No, it didn't. Should it have come up? O'Shea pulled one of the folders out of the accordion file and opened it on the desk. He lifted a document that looked like a letter off the top. As I said, we've made it public that we're going for the death penalty on Watts, he said. After the prelim, I think he realized the writing was on the wall. He's got an appeal on the probable cause. He's got an appeal on the probable cause for the traffic stop, but it will go nowhere, and he and his lawyer know it. An insanity defense? is a non-starter as well. This guy, as calculating and organized as any killer I've ever prosecuted. So they responded last week with this. Before I show it to you, I have to know that you understand that this is a letter from an attorney. It is a pro-offer. It is a pre-offer. No matter what happens, whether we move forward with this or not, the information contained in this letter is off the record. If we choose to ignore this offer, no investigation can come of the information in this letter. Do you understand that? Ryder nodded. Bosch didn't. Detective Bosch? O'Shea prompted. Maybe I shouldn't see it then, Bosch said. Maybe I shouldn't be here. You were the one who wouldn't give Freddie the file. If the case means that much to you, then I think you should be here. Bosch finally nodded. Okay, he said. O'Shea slid the paper across the desk, and Bosch and Ryder leaned forward to read it together. Bosch first unfolded his glasses and put them on. September 12, 2006. Richard O'Shea, Assistant District Attorney, Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Office 16-11, 210 West Temple Street, Los Angeles, California, 90012-3210. Reason: California versus Reynard Watts. Dear Mr. O'Shea, this letter is intended to open discussions regarding a disposition in the above referenced case. All statement made herein and hereafter is in connection with these decisions are made with the understanding that they are inadmissible under California Evidence Code 1153, California Penal Code 1192.4, and People v. Tanner, 45 Cal at 3.3D 345, 350, 119 California RPTR, whatever the heck that means, 407, 1975. I suggest to you that Mr. Watts would be willing, on terms and conditions outlined below, to share with you, the investigators of your choice, information regarding 9 homicides, excluding the 2 in the above referenced case, and to plead guilty to the charges in the above referenced case in exchange for the people's agreement not to seek the death penalty on the instant homicide charges, or to file charges in regard to the homicide about which he would provide information. Furthermore, in return for the cooperation and information Mr. Watts would provide, you must agree that any and all statements by Mr. Watts and any information derived therefrom will not be used against him in any criminal case. No information provided pursuant to this agreement may be divulged to any other state or federal law enforcement agencies unless and until those agencies, through their representatives, agreed to be bound by the terms and conditions of this agreement. No statements made or other information provided by Mr. Watts during any off-the-record pre-offer, or discussion may be used against him in the prosecution's case in chief, nor may you make derivative use of or pursue any investigative leads suggested by any statements made or information provided by the defendant. In the event the above referenced case goes to trial, if Mr. Watts offers testimony materially different from any statement made or other information provided during any pre-offers or discussions, then you may, of course, impeach him concerning such prior inconsistencies, statements, or information. I suggest that the families of 8 young women and 1 male victim will attain some form of closure with the knowledge of what transpired in regard to their loved ones, and in 8 of these instances be able to conduct proper religious ceremonies and burial after Mr. Watts leads your investigators to the place where these victims now rest. Additionally, these families will find perhaps some comfort in knowing that Mr. Watts is serving a prison sentence of life without the possibility of parole. Mr. Watts offers to provide information in regard to 9 known and unknown homicides between 1992 and 2003. As an initial offer of credibility and good faith, he suggests that investigators review the investigation into the death of Daniel Fitzpatrick, 63, who was burned to death in his Hollywood Boulevard pawn shop on April 30th, 1992. Investigative files will reveal that Mr. Fitzpatrick was armed and standing behind the roll-down security fence at the front of his store when he was set afire by an assailant using lighter fluid and a butane lighter. The can of Easy Light lighter fluid was left behind, standing upright in front of the security fence. This information was never made public. Further, Mr. Watts suggests that police investigate files in regard to the September 1993 disappearance of Marie Gesto be reviewed as an additional showing of his credibility and good faith. The record will reveal that while the whereabouts of Miss Gesto were never determined, her car was located by police in a garage at a Hollywood apartment complex known as the High Tower. The car contained Miss Gesto's clothing and equestrian equipment, plus a grocery bag containing a 1-pound package of carrots. Miss Gesto intended to use the carrots to feed the horses she groomed in exchange for riding time at the Sunset Ranch stables in Beechwood Canyon. Again, this information was never made public. I would suggest that if any argument or disposition could be achieved, such as agreement would fall within the exceptions to California's prohibition against plea bargains, serious felony, inasmuch as absent Mr. Watts' cooperation, there are insufficient evidence and material witnesses to prove the people's case in regard to these 9 homicides. Moreover, the people's forbearance regarding the death penalty is entirely discretionary and does not represent a substantial charge and sentence. California Penal Code 1192.7a. Please contact me at your earliest convenience if the foregoing is acceptable. Sincerely, Maurice Swan, PA, 101 Broadway, Suite 2, Los Angeles, California, 90013. Bosch realized he had read almost the entire letter without taking a breath. He now gulped down some air, but did not displace the cold tightness that was forming in his chest. "You're not going to agree to this, are you?" he asked. O'Shea held his gaze for a moment before responding. "As a matter of fact, I am negotiating with Swan right now." That was the initial pro-offer, either or. "I've improved the state's take substantially since he arrived. I've improved the state's take substantially since that arrived. In what way? He'll have to plead to all the cases. We'll get 11 murder convictions, and you'll get more headlines in time for the election, Bosch thought but didn't say. But he still walks, he asked. No, Detective, he doesn't walk. He never sees the light of day again. Have you ever been up to Pelican Bay? The place they send sex offenders? It only sounds like a nice place. But no death penalty. You're giving him that. Olivia smirked as if Bosch didn't see the light. Yes, that is what we are giving, O'Shea said. That's all we're giving. No death penalty. He goes away forever and a day. Bosch shook his head, looked at Ryder, and then back at O'Shea. He said nothing because he knew it wasn't his decision to make. But before we agree to such a deal, O'Shea said, we need to make a damn sure he is good for those 9. Watts is no dummy. This could all be a trick to avoid the needle, or it could be the real thing. I want to bring you two into this to work with Freddie in finding out which it is. I'll make the calls and you will be cut loose. That will be the assignment. Neither Bosch nor Ryder responded. O'Shea pressed on. It is obvious he knows things about the 2 Bates cases cited in the letter. Freddie confirmed the Fitzpatrick thing. He was killed during the riots after the Rodney King verdict came in. Burned to death behind the roll-down fence in his pawn shop. He was heavily armed. At the time, and what is not clear is how his killer got close enough to set him on fire. The can of Easy Light was found just like Watts said, standing upright in front of the security fence. The mention of the Gastro case we could not confirm because you've got the file, Detective Bosch. You've already confirmed the part about the garage. Did he get that right about the clothes and the carrots? Bosch reluctantly nodded. The car was public information, he said. The media was all over it, but the bag of carrots was our ace in the hole. Nobody knew about that except me, my partner at the time, and the evidence tech who opened the bag. We held it back because that's where we ended up thinking she crossed his path. The carrots came from a Mayfair supermarket on Franklin at the bottom of Beechwood Canyon. Turned out it was her routine to stop there before going up to the stables. The day she disappeared, she followed the routine. She came out with the carrots and probably her killer as a trailer. We found witnesses who put her in the store. Nothing else after that, until we found her car. O'Shea nodded. He pointed to the letter, which was still on the desk in front of the Bosch and Ryder. Then this is looking good. No, it's not, Bosch said. Don't do this. Don't do what? Don't make the deal. Why shouldn't we? Because if he is the one who took Marie Gesto and killed her, and he killed those 8 other people, maybe even chopped them up like the 2 they caught him with, then he isn't someone who should be allowed to live, whether in prison cell or not. They ought to strap him down, put the juice in him, and send him on down the hole to where he belongs. O'Shea nodded as if it were a valid consideration. What about all of these open cases? He countered. Look, I don't like the idea of this guy living out his life in a private room at a Pelican Bay any more than you do, but we have a responsibility to clear those cases and provide answers to the families of those people. Also, you have to remember, we have announced that We are seeking the death penalty. That doesn't mean it's automatic. We have to go to trial and win, and then we have to do it all over again to get the jury to recommend death. I'm sure you know that there are any number of things that could go wrong. It only takes one juror to hang a case, and it only takes one to stop the death penalty. It only takes one soft judge to ignore the jury's recommendation anyways. Bosch didn't respond. He knew how the system worked, how it could be manipulated, and how nothing was a sure thing. Still, it bothered him. He also knew that a life sentence didn't always mean a life sentence. Every year people like Charlie Manson and Sirhan got their shot. Nothing lasts forever, not even a life sentence. Plus, there's the cost factor, O'Shea continued. Watts doesn't have money, but Maurice Swan took the case for publicity value. If we take this to trial, he will be ready for battle. Maury's a damn good lawyer. We can expect experts to cancel out our experts. Scientific analysis to cancel out our analysis. The trial will last months and cost the county a fortune. I know you don't want to hear that money is a consideration here, but that is the reality. I have the budget management office already on my back about this one. This pro offer could be the safest and best way to make sure this man harms no one else in the future. The best way? Bosch asked. Not the right way, if you ask me. O'Shea picked up a pen and drummed it lightly on his desk before responding. Detective Bosch, why did you sign out the Gesto file on so many times? Bosch felt Ryder turn and look at him. She had asked him the same thing on more than one occasion. I told you, he said. I pulled it because it had been my case. It bothered me that we never made anybody for it. In other words, it has haunted you. Bosch nodded hesitantly. Did she have family? Bosch nodded again. She had parents up in Bakersfield. They had a lot of dreams for her. Think about them. And think about the families of the others. We can't tell them that Watts was the one unless we know for sure. My guess is that they will want to know, and that they were willing to trade that knowledge for his life. It's better that he plead guilty to all of them than that we get him for only 2. Bosch said nothing. He had registered his objection. He now knew it was time to go to work. Ryder was on the same vibe. What is the time frame on this? She asked. I want to move quickly, O'Shea said. If this is legit, I want to clean it up and get it done. Gotta get it in before the election, right? Bosch asked. He then immediately regretted it. O'Shea's lip formed a tight line. Blood seemed to collect beneath the skin around his eyes. Detective, he said, I will give you that. I'm running for election, and clearing 11 murders with convictions would be helpful to my cause. But do not suggest the election is my only motivation here. Every night that those parents who carried dreams for their daughter go to bed not knowing where she is or what happened to her is a night of terror pain as far as I'm concerned. Even after 13 years. So I want to move quickly and assuringly, and you could keep your speculations about anything else to yourself. Fine, Bosch said. When do we talk to this guy? O'Shea looked at Olivius and then back to Bosch. Well, I think we should have an exchange of file first. You should come up to speed on Watts, and I'd like Freddie to familiarize himself with the Gesto file. Once that is done, we'll set something up with Maurice Swan. What about tomorrow? Tomorrow's fine, Bosch said. Swan will be there during the interview. O'Shea nodded. Maury's writing this one all the way. He'll milk every angle. Probably end up with a book and a movie deal before this thing's over. Maybe even a guest anchor slot on court TV. Yeah, well, Bosch said, at least then he'd be out of the courtroom. Never thought of it that way, O'Shea said. Did you bring the Gesto records? Bosch opened his briefcase on his lap and took out the investigation file, which was contained in a 3-inch thick binder, generally known as a murder book. He handed it to O'Shea, who turned and gave it to Olivius. And I will give you this in return, O'Shea said. He slid the file back into the accordion folder and handed it all across the desk. Happy reading, he said. Are you sure about tomorrow? Bosch looked at Ryder to see if she had an objection. They had another day before they needed to walk the matrix filing to the DA. But the work was mostly finished and he knew Ryder could handle the rest. When Ryder said nothing, Bosch looked back at O'Shea. We'll be ready, he said. Then I will call Maury and set it up. Where's Watts? Right here in the building, O'Shea said. We've got him in high power on keep away status. Good, Ryder said. What about the other 7? Bosch asked. What about them? Are there no files? The pre-offer, as well as Maury Swan, indicates that these were women who were never found and possibly never reported missing in the first place, O'Shea said. Watts is willing to lead us to them, but there is no prep work we can do for them. Bosch nodded. Any other questions? O'Shea asked, signaling that the meeting was over. We'll let you know, Bosch said. I know I am repeating myself, but I feel I need to, O'Shea said. This investigation is all off the record. That file is pre-offer. That is part of the plea negotiation. Nothing in that file or anything that he tells you can ever be used to make a case against him. If this falls apart, then you will not be able to use the information to pursue him. Is that clearly understood? Bosch didn't answer. It's clear, Ryder said. There is one exception that I have negotiated. If he lies, if you catch him at any time in a lie, or if any piece of information he gives you during this process proves to be knowingly false, all bets are off, and we can go after him for all of it. He has been made quite aware of this too. Bosch nodded. He stood up. Ryder did too. Do you need me to call someone to free you two up? O'Shea asked. I can flex a muscle if needed. Ryder shook her head. I don't think so, she said. Harry was already working the Gesto case. The 7 women might be unknown victims, but there's got to be a file in archives on the man in the pawn shop. It all cuts open, unsolved in. We can handle our supervisor. Okay then, as soon as I have the interview set up, I will call. Meantime, all of my numbers are in the file. Freddy's too. Bosch nodded to O'Shea and threw a glance at Olivius before turning to the door. Detectives, O'Shea said. Bosch and Ryder turned back to him. He was standing now. He wanted to shake their hands. I am hoping you are on my side on this, O'Shea said. Bosch shook his hand, unsure whether O'Shea was talking about the case or the election. He said, if Watts can help me bring Marie Gesto home to her parents, then I'm on your side. It wasn't a completely accurate assumption of his feelings, but it got him out of the office. Well, that's the end of part 1, chapter 2. look out for part 1, chapter 3, in the next episode. Until then, take care, hit that like button, and subscribe away.